We will never be able to quantify the collateral damage that has happened because of mandates, because of people who were tricked into taking vaccine, because of job loss or life changes that happened.
And these doctor friends I've asked to come on television and share their opinions, and guess what they say? Can't risk it, can't talk about it, can't bring my license up. It's a whole nother issue in its own, is that these doctors who are talking about their experience in a medical field with their expertise can't talk about it.
We said at the beginning, it's a multi-layered issue. Let's not get triggered or conflate all these issues into one, because we're talking about the insanity of policies, the lack of leadership because of the bad decisions, because of the government overreach. Because we're talking of that does not mean that we are anti-vax. We are not that. Does not mean that we are COVID deniers. What we're just saying is that how everything was handled was absolutely insane. We're doing our country a disservice when you have media that is already, they are attached to a certain story or a narrative. And we see that quite a bit, unfortunately. And there's still a lot of good people that are doing good work, but there's a lot of more influence in terms of a certain narrative has to be said, whether it's from money, whether it's from government handouts, whether it's from people who are just so ideologically motivated that they hate anything that might be associated with conservatism or even being centrist now. Like what left side leaning politics is no longer the politics of JFK, of this libertarian view of what Jean Chrétien was as being a liberal prime minister. That view of being a liberal now is no longer what it was. It has actually shifted to such an extreme is that you can't even consider it liberal politics anymore. They just fly a banner of that name.
One of the things we did last week that you and I were discussing of a video we posted about, what was it called again? Capital gains tax. We were discussing it, and in our opinions, when we watched your clip, we went, that maybe wasn't fully given in context to speak to the whole part of it. And so it wasn't false what you said. It just wasn't in full context. So what did we do? You posted a clip, and you brought context, and you brought correction to it. Hey, guys, that clip I posted didn't bring the full picture to it. We corrected it to make sure that people could get the balance of it. Yep. And when you and I were discussing it, one of the things we said was, like, we need to keep the integrity of ideas and make sure that the show is objective.
Even at our own hurt.
Even at our own. Don't care one bit.
And we can promise, and we've said this over and over again, we can promise we'll be wrong.
Absolutely.
We're going to be wrong, and we're going to get it wrong.
For sure.
But we will correct it.
Yes.
100%. Because it's not about us. It's not about David's ego or Jeremy looking great. It's about actually trying to pursue a greater thing than that, which is truth, which is trying to find out what is actually going on. And also so we don't misrepresent. I don't want to lead people down my biases, although I know I have them. I'm aware of them. But that actually makes us stronger than people who are unaware of them. Because at least I know my potential weaknesses or my potential. If I'm aware of where I might have a bias or a weakness, well, I can try to avoid that pitfall a bit more than people who just are blindly, I don't have any biases. But anyways. Okay, so Convoy. Let's fast forward a little bit because you and I for 13 days, we remember the lives we used to do? Yeah. Every night or every second night we do a live with some people online. How cold it was.
Oh, it was
the Ottawa cold sucks.
It was like minus 25, minus 30.
And it would get through
the
your
humidity.
Clothes.
Oh, it was bad.
Bone chilling. And we'd be walking there for an hour and a half down the streets, updating, connecting with people as to what's going on. That was so fun, actually. Yeah. I think in one of the clips we were just showing, it was kind of just a B-roll, and you see me kind of pacing around corners.
You were live.
It's because I'm live, just trying to find places to walk and talk.
Yeah, even in that clip, though, you notice how empty the streets were at night. Like, it's like the place shut down. It was quiet. It was.
Yeah, here, I want to show this clip. I don't know what it is, but I'm going to show it. And where are you guys from?
I'm from England.
Mississauga, Ontario.
So why are you guys here today?
We're here for the freedom for everybody.
We're here to stand united as a country and say no more lockdowns and mandates. Everybody's here with a good heart, compassion, and really want to come together. And people are just laughing because everybody knows that Canada's a loving and free country, and together we will stand together and break through and make a difference for this country.
So how'd you pick those guys when you did that interview?
I think you and I were just in the mode of trying to connect with as many people as we can. They were just walking by, and that's just, they weren't like the token colored people. That was so common, in terms of the amount of racial diversity that was there, is that it was not this white supremacy, white privilege crap that was going on. That's the beautiful thing about Canada, is that we are a diverse country, and that is an extremely inclusive country in that sense of we are all here as Canadians. We have different ethnic heritages. We have different cultures we may come from.
Well, especially when it came to the truckers, when they're calling them white supremacists. How many white truckers did we find? Like
Remember that one family I
Yeah.
chatted with, and he had his three
Amazing.
beautiful
What-
kids in the back, and him and his
Where
wife,
were
and
they
they're Sikh. I wish I remember his name.
I remember that.
I
But
don't
like,
have the video on my iPad, but we'll find it later.
Not a single sign, not a single guy I met here with racism or something like that, or white supremacy.
Yeah.
It's all about everybody's hugging, kissing. Look at that money here. Everybody's doing that, and gifts and everything.
it was probably like 10 or 15% white, 10 or 15% black, 10 or 15% Indian, 10 or 15 for truckers. Like it was
all over.
diverse, extremely diverse.
Yeah.
And then they have the nerve to say white supremacists with Nazi flags, and especially that whole Nazi flag thing. That was so ridiculous. But you and I tried to be as objective as we could about it, and said, okay, if there's a Nazi flag here, we're gonna find it then. Nobody, we couldn't even find anyone who saw the flag, except we found one trucker who saw a very fishy situation. We tried to get him on camera. He didn't feel comfortable because he said he was actually scared to speak against what he saw. And so we were going, what? And so he said he saw a crowd. He wasn't willing to go on camera, but he did tell us that he saw a crowd of three or four people right at sunrise before anybody was up on Parliament Hill, holding the flag up with a couple cameras, grabbed the footage, and then pulled the flag down and then ran away.
Crazy.
And we never saw the Nazi flag. That was the only single person out of thousands of people we talked to. No one else had seen the flag. Nobody.
I want to bring up this point in a second, because it's interesting when you see what was happening on the street and what they're trying to protest, what the group was there. They wanted to get Canada back to the way that it was, wanted to have their freedoms and their charter rights upheld. They felt it was being infringed upon. There was compelled of vaccination. People weren't able to work. The whole country was not just inconvenience, is a complete understatement, but there were people that were it halted. And when this convoy approached Ottawa and got there, this could have been dealt with a lot better by the leadership of the country and actually figured out a solution faster. But that was not what happened. We had the leader of our country who actually, in my opinion, propagated this convoy and actually made it a bigger thing than what it could have been. He could have talked, he could have approached, he could have been a prime minister and reached and talked with all of his citizens and come out. He could have tried to open up conversation or find solutions that's going to meet what both people are thinking. But he didn't do that. He actually used language that incited a lot more diversity, division. He used language that was definitely trying to segregate this group away from the rest of Canadians. I want to show this clip because this is Pierre Poilievre at the time.
Before you do that, though, one of the things that I was thinking about while we were there, and I'm obviously reflecting on now, is if COVID was so, like we said, we've seen a lot of things come out to show that it wasn't what they were saying it was. It didn't spread like they said it was, and it wasn't as deadly as they said it was. And the vax and all sorts of things where it's like none of it was even. There was some truth. Very little of it was actual truth. And you and I must have talked over 13 to 14 days that we were there to thousands of people, face to face, in crowds from morning to night, surrounded by people with less than a foot room, usually pushing our way through crowds. How come there was no COVID spike in the tens of thousands of people that were there? How come you and I never got sick? How come we were in trucks with people? We were up close, violating all the restrictions because we were reporting there, had no ability to keep the restrictions even if we tried.
Because we did commonsensical things, and like we probably already had an immunity built up from flu and other things that we would have had. We took things that made ourselves healthy or tried to. We weren't ridiculous about it. Like this is the thing that when you get group hysteria over it, like think of the insanity of this. If you think of this, I remember when you could fly during those times, and we would jump on an airplane, and we would have to stand 6 feet apart in line waiting to get my pass scanned and my ID checked with a face mask on, right? This is probably the only times I wore a face mask was when I was there going through, and pull the face mask down so they could look at you, and then they would say, okay, you can go on, and then you walk 6 feet apart and you walk down the tunnel towards the airplane, and then you get on this airplane, which is a can of sardines where you're beside people shoulder to shoulder
with
to
recycled air.
300 people in a tin box, recycled air, and you're okay with that, but yet everywhere else they need you to stand 6 feet apart. But guess what? I'd have my mask below my nose or something like that, and I would be like, it would be like the SS. Not is that what they're called, the SS?
Yeah, but
It would be like someone like that coming up and getting after me for having it down, and then 20 minutes later, food would come out. The entire plane would take
Pull them
off
all
their
down.
masks, and they would eat for 45 minutes, and I'm just like looking around.
And don't even, the masks is a whole nother thing. And you know what? I'm going to share this now because to the people that I'm triggering going, you anti-maskers, sorry, but it was so silly and ridiculous, and there was absolutely no science to back those little paper masks that we picked up off the floor of our car to put on before going in somewhere that had no sanitary anything to it, never mind the ability to block any real particles. But like, for example, as in my role with being a pastor, we go in and pray for people at hospitals. And so there's pre-COVID, I'm talking way before COVID, you go into ICUs. And so I've been into a bunch of ICUs with people with very intense and real issues. And there's been actually more than one time where I had to put on a full body, gloves, yellow shield, mask, everything. And you put everything on because they're that sensitive, you have to be in there. And guess what's one of the things they tell me when I'm going in? Sir, after 20 minutes, please come outside the room and we're going to put a new mask on you. Because after 20 minutes, your mask is no longer useful. And then, if you touch your mask at all, please come out of the room and grab a new mask. If you touch it at all, please exit the room and put on a new mask. So they knew, and they do know, all the medical experts know, this is not they know these masks are not meant to be touched or moved or ruffled around or put in your pocket or put in your car or hang on your car mirror or none of that. It's not doing anything. And never mind the particles that would pass through. You could blow out. I saw a video where a guy blows out like 25 candles in a row through his mask, showing how far your breath actually goes. Or even if you did the infrared. Have you seen the infrared video where they show sorry, it's not infrared. I guess it's heat signature, where they can see the heat of the breath coming out of the mask. So the person's wearing the mask, and it's not only coming through the mask, but it's coming out, around, above, all around. It's just pouring everywhere. It's going. This is not saving anybody. It's not doing anything.
It was virtue signaling at its finest.
That's all it was.
Or it was just naivety or people not trying to dig in and say, is this actually effective?
So
this is where groupthink comes in. I'm just going to do, and I had friends and family who were like this, that I'm just going to do what the government tells me, and I'm not going to think outside of it because I trust the government knows all and is best. I want government. I want good government. I want them to do their job well. But the thing is, there's times throughout history and where they get it so badly wrong. And if we as citizens aren't activated to actually question and say, does this make sense? Is this logical? Is this reasonable? Is there data to back this? Or are you just guessing? Because at the end of the day, we are all just people. Take away all titles and positions. We are just people that have biases, that have got our leanings, that are stupid at times, that sometimes are very smart. We are all just people. And when we go to that extent, you have to realize the government is not God, but that's how majority of the population treated it during that era. Gosh, it was ridiculous. Like the whole airplane thing. It got me every single time. I'm like, oh my gosh.
Well, even
I just ate for an hour and a half on flights from
the
Calgary to
ridiculousness would continue to go on. Even the whole parking, so like Costco, Superstore, all of those areas were allowed, and everything was allowed to go on, but all the small stores had to shut down. All the small stores had to shut down, and all the big companies got to keep going and mandatory, and were totally fine and allowed to happen. The whole reason why there was a bunch of churches that did drive-in church. Those were all shut down because they were deemed to be unsafe in their cars, in a vehicle by yourself, watching a screen through your car. But you go down the street to Costco, and you're allowed to not only park together, but get out and go in the store together. And yes, I understand you need food, but the whole logic, there was no logic. It wasn't thought through.
And when those things started stacking up, you start to see these inconsistencies, realizing that municipal city governments provincial governments and federal governments were on completely different pages. There was no good governance at the time. You had spineless people who were leading. In fact, we had non-leaders who were leading. In a time when you needed leaders the most, we didn't have them anywhere. And in those moments, you need a Churchill. You need people who are willing to stand up when society is against them, say, no, here's the right path, who know what they're doing. And we didn't have that. And when these things start stacking up, that is why this protest started to occur and started to happen, because they were sick and tired of seeing these inconsistencies everywhere we'd go. We're like, this does not make sense. We're not changing anything. It's been a year and a half of what's going on.
Well, even when you talk about inconsistencies, do you remember when they were there's been a whole bunch of footage of what's the main dog? Fauci talking about how distancing wasn't actually something he believed worked, but it just started to take wind and people started doing it. And then he talked at the very beginning when they were questioning him about masks, his words, his thoughts, and you could probably show the video if you find it here.
The masks are important for someone who's infected to prevent them from infecting someone else. Right now in the United States, people should not be walking around with masks.
You're sure of it? Because people are listening really closely to this.
Right now, people should not be walking. There's no reason to be walking around with a mask. When you're in the middle of an outbreak, wearing a mask might make people feel a little bit better, and it might even block a droplet, but it's not providing the perfect protection that people think that it is.
Masks are not effective in stopping or spreading of any viruses at all. They're a minimization tactic, but then down the road, they started to realize that, well, this is a visualization of the virus, and if we can keep it visual in front of people, they'll do what we mandate. And
we've got doctor friends that were staunch supporters
massively for
the vaccine when it first came out, and then now you ask them again, completely against, and they'll say, yeah, it was complete.
Yep, and these doctor friends I've asked to come on television and share their opinions, and guess what they say? Can't risk it, can't talk about it, can't bring my license up. They can't.
Yeah.
It's a whole nother issue in its own, is that these doctors who are talking about their experience in a medical field with their expertise about it, can't talk about it.
Yeah, and we
huge problem.
Will never know, I want to make sure I'm saying this the right way, we will never be able to quantify the collateral damage that has happened because of mandates, because of people who were tricked into taking vaccine, because of job loss or life changes that happened. We'll never be able to quantify all the damage that happened.
We had family
because
members die of low-grade cancer because they couldn't get treated, seen, surgery. And
other reasons. You and I experienced three deaths within the hospital. And the fact of not even having the decency where family could go sit with them in their last moments. We experienced that.
Yeah,
it's like
none of them were COVID either.
Like if that's you and you're listening right now, or you know of someone, or that was your experience as well, where you had a family member pass during COVID and you were not able to be, but gosh, we feel your pain and we know your pain, because that is like all you'd want to do. All I would want to do when I pass is be surrounded by my loved ones, and that was taken. You'll never be able to quantify that from countless people. It's nuts to think of that, of the stuff that happened.
One of the biggest purposes for doing this show, and I really want to encourage people to follow us, like us, or dislike it. I don't care, to be honest. I really don't care. We're here.
Thumbs down it. I dare you to.
Right now. Now's your chance. Comment, like, dislike. But the whole point is to disagree and talk. If you're going, okay, guys, you missed it here. No, I did have COVID throughout my whole family, and it affected us. I know there's people. We're not just denying that. We're talking about the ideas of the scenarios and the way it was handled, and the lack of logic, and how experts were suppressed and certain ones were risen to the top, and we only cut certain stories out here and talked about one angle here and there. It was the whole idea of everything to do with the Freedom Convoy and the way it was portrayed was just ignorance gone to sea, and that's what we're discussing. So we hope that you guys can jump on board with this and let us know your experience, your thoughts. Maybe there's more angles in here you want us to go down. But this is something that, as our kids age, it already feels like an eternity ago. Like, what are we at here? 2024.
2 years since we've been in
2 years ago
in the convoy.
My kids, they're young enough to kind of remember it.
Yeah.
But I even remember talking with some of my friends who have gone through the thick of it with us, and we go, I forgot it was that wild, that restricted, that ridiculous. And I told them the story about how I couldn't buy a birthday card for my wife, but I was allowed to buy a Christmas card because only seasonal items were allowed. The ink on the card determined the safety for me to buy this stupid card. Like, And then so when I tell that story, they're going, "What?" I'm like, "Yep, that was Manitoba. That was the gods of the government telling you how it was safe and not safe for the ink of the birthday card, for the ink of the Christmas card."
If you're on YouTube,
Gosh.
tell us your craziest COVID story in the comments.
Yeah, I'd love to see it.
I want to talk through a couple of those because we've got some that, and they keep coming up in memory as we're talking more about this. But again, like we started off with the show, is we don't want to forget what happened, so we repeat where it was.
Yeah.
And also, one thing you were just saying, we said at the beginning, it's a multi-layered issue, all of this thing. So let's not get triggered or conflate all these issues into one.
Exactly.
Because we're talking about the insanity of policies, the lack of leadership, because of the bad decisions, because of the government overreach. Because we're talking of that does not mean that we are vaccine deniers or that's not the right word. Anti-vax. We are not that, for the record. Does not mean that we are COVID deniers. What we're just saying is that how everything was handled was absolutely insane. And the fact there was people that were hurt because of COVID, but there's also a lot of people hurt because of how COVID was handled. So we have to explore that, and we have to recognize so we can be better as a country going forward. Know how to recognize, do we have leaders that are going for them?
I would love to go through a very detailed show where we look through the hypocrisy, where obviously best decisions made in the time being, but once new information come out, you're now liable. You're liable for the new information coming out. And so to even see, I can't remember his name, the CNN host who's no longer in CNN, he got released or he left, I don't remember his name. He's the brother to the New York.
Cuomo.
Now there's shows with him and I think it's Trevor Noah or whatever his name is, where they're insulting Joe Rogan for ivermectin. And then now he takes ivermectin right now on the regular to detox and do all sorts of stuff. And he was criticizing it as horse medicine. But that's what I'd love to do, is I'd love to do a show of hypocrisy and what lies were told all the way through, so we can actually unpack what happened and what to learn from it.
I think one thing as well, and this is not, I don't have data off the top of my head to back this, but we should, my foot's on the table like all casual, just spread out here, it is unusual to see the amount of healthy, athletic individuals, plus all the others that just seem to be dropping dead, having heart issues, the amount and the rise of that. And I can't help but think that is directly related to the lack of scrutiny that the vaccines went through and all these different things. I don't have anything to back that. I'm just saying it's just the timing is super coincidental. You look at someone like LeBron James' son, Bronny James, who was just drafted this last couple of weeks, and you look at him. But remember, a year ago is that he dropped on the floor because he had a heart attack.
Heart issue as an 18-year-old boy.
Yeah, and the guy is fit as can be.
Extremely athletic.
You have this happening all over. There's compilations of this stuff going on, and obviously I'm sure some of them are outside of the scope of the last couple of years, but there is an interesting anomaly that is happening when it comes to that. This is the type of thing that people have to be aware of, is that in the short term, you can't just be short term when looking at these things. You have to think, how is this going to affect us in anything we do? Not just in the next month, but the next year, next 5 years. I know so many people that took the vaccine, didn't do any research or thoughts or even consider, they just was blind trust.
Yeah.
They just took it because of an inconvenience, like I want to travel next month. But they didn't think of, will this affect me 10 years down the road? Will this affect me 20 years, 5 years down the road? That is such short-term, being short-sighted. Yeah. We have to be better than that. Yeah. We have to be.
For sure.
Where do you want to go next?
Yeah, I kind of want to encapsulate our journey through the convoy and what we saw. So once, essentially, what came of it, and what can we learn from it? That's essentially what I want.
Well, you fast forward to the last couple of days we were there, and then the couple of days after, the Emergencies Act was invoked, which was hugely controversial.
They deemed it to be terrorism, right?
Well, they were using it. Yes, I think in order to invoke the Emergencies Act, it had to be, there must have been some sort of threat and safety to Canada, according to the CSIS Act. The government was using that. They were trying to extend that out. And I think when you look up the Coutts border blockade and the Ambassador Bridge border blockade, that's what gave the power to the government to try to justify, or at least they thought they could justify, the use of the act, because now we are affecting livelihoods of Canadians because it's affecting the economy of transport of goods and services, which is hilarious and ironic because for the last 2 years, the policies the government was putting forth was affecting the livelihoods of Canadians, right? But that's what they were trying to use, and obviously they threw out the word terrorism and all that kind of stuff.
Rules for thee, but not for me.
Exactly. So they end up using that, which then brought in outside forces to help get rid of the convoy, which they were there. They were dug in. They weren't moving. But you look at the abuse of power. The city of Ottawa had the resources to handle, but they didn't.
Yeah.
The province of Ontario had the resources to handle. As I connect here, I'm going to show you this video because the premier, who is Doug Ford, he essentially, I believe, just cowered and passed the buck. And here's what he says. Let's talk about this.
We're now 2 weeks into the siege of the city of Ottawa.
The siege.
I call it a siege because that's what it is.
Oh, okay. Thank you for saying that.
Thank you for clarifying. I'm now convinced of the siege,
Mr.
Doug
Ford.
Ford. Premier Ford.
Because that's what it is.
Occupation. This is no longer a protest. With a protest, you peacefully make your...
Can we look up the definition of siege? Can you pause for a second?
Yep. I think of catapults
Me too.
and knights on armored horses. I always think of
Nice.
Monty Python Holy Grail. They run up to the giant castle walls. Attack!
Right.
A situation in which soldiers or police officers surround a city or building in order to try to take control of it.
A military operation in which enemy forces surround a town or building, cutting off essential supplies with the aim of compelling the surrender of those inside.
It's a siege because that's what it is. Thanks, Doug.
So a military operation. This was not a military operation, which the enemy... We're not enemies. We're actually trying to get Canada.
Citizens.
Where I would actually say we're trying to, whatever. Enemy forces surround the town or building. Nothing was surrounded. We took up some streets, cutting off essential supplies. That is kind of true for. You could argue for the Coots and the other border blockade. I think I'll tell you my honest opinion. I feel like that kind of got too far. I like
I don't know the details of it, to be honest.
But when they did that, I was like, okay, and I think you're taking that a little too far. That's just my personal opinion. I'm not saying I was wrong. With the aim of compelling the surrender of those inside. I love that. Let's keep going.
And I know that the vast majority of the people did that. They came, they peacefully demonstrated, they made their point, and they left. And I want to say to those people, you've been heard loud and clear. Canada has heard you. My message to those still in Ottawa, to those at our border crossings, please go home. To those of you who have brought your children, please take them home. I urge you, it's time to leave.
He's saying that because they declared a state of emergency, and also I'm sure he knows that the Emergencies Act was about to be enacted, and they're going to forcefully remove. So that ended up happening, right? We've seen videos of
last
that.
couple days you and I were there.
Yeah, and that started to move in, and they totally dismantled it and were arresting people. We had people that we knew that were arrested. Some were actually charged, but some were actually just arrested and dropped off on a highway outside the city. So many different things like that happened. We know as of a couple months ago that it was actually in the Supreme Court, it was ruled that the government of Canada broke the law by invoking the Emergencies Act. They also bypassed the power that the city had, that the province had. They basically just cowered in the face of it.
That's a huge deal.
It's a massive deal. And it goes unnoticed, I think. Because what happens if you're to break the law, Jer?
I pay the price for it, and either I have to pay a penalty depending on the level of it,
Or you're going to jail.
jail.
I've kind of lost some faith in the justice system, the fact of what happens when leaders break the law like that.
Yeah.
Because that set a massive precedent. And 2 years later, it's ruled not only were the policies you were invoking during COVID affecting people's lives, but the way you handled escalated. That escalated the situation where I think if you had a proper leader in there that you could have actually figured something out and found a proper solution with Canadian citizens, not an enemy from a different country or enemy within. But yet you chose to use powers that are supposed to be reserved for an actual crisis where Canada is in a state of real emergency.
Yeah, for sure.
Anyways. You're just nodding at each other if you're listening on the podcast. So that closed it up. That ended the whole thing in terms of people going home. Things were confiscated, and that basically disbanded the rest of the convoy. Yeah. But the thing that happened in the subsequent months, which we should focus on for a second here in the last couple of minutes, is what did the convoy achieve? Because I know for a number of things, you saw province after province after province.
Well, they changed the science. That's what they did.
What do you mean?
I mean, the Freedom Convoy made all the science change because all of a sudden,
of course. I see what you're saying.
People stopped dying and things started changing, and the flu came back, and
like literally, like dominoes, province after province, starting with Saskatchewan and
I'm being
Alberta.
extremely sarcastic because what I'm saying is nothing changed. Our logic came back, and people started being logical again, and then the provinces started opening up again. And
well, they immediately dropped the mandates that were in province by province by province. Quebecers, people who were in Quebec, if you're a Quebec resident, tell us in the comment, because you were moments away from being taxed if you did not get vaccinated, just so you know. And then you slowly start to see this move away, all because of what the convoy achieved. We had a change in the opposition of the leadership of government because of that, because of his lack of leadership during COVID from the Conservative Party. You saw some major sweeping changes. It was you even have Bill Morneau, who's a former finance minister before Chrystia Freeland. He several times has said that, criticized Trudeau for his language and his action during that. I know did Morneau get let go during the COVID thing? Was that almost a direct result at the end of it? I think it was.
I don't remember.
I think it was. I think there's some heads that rolled that way too.
Really?
Anyways, I want to know is that what does that mean in terms of if the government was found to break the law regarding the Emergencies Act? Is there any consequence to that? Is it only in the polls? Yeah. I hope people realize that, but then does that get enough coverage?
Question that we
because
have to figure out.
What repercussions? Can you have people who are in power go to jail? Have they? In the history of Canada, has anyone gone to jail when they've broken laws? How many laws have been broken through that? Does that even mean anything anymore? Yeah. All these things are questions that I think all of us as citizens have to ask, and we'll continue to pursue and talk about this more. But those are things I don't have answers to yet, but I want to know, because that's a serious thing. It sets precedent for future governments and how they can,
for future crimes, future laws broken, future violations.
If you get a slap on the hand for something that's as serious as that, well, guess what? Future prime ministers who might be more inclined to use things for their advantage, well, they'll just say, well, there's not a big consequence, so I'll just do it. Yep. Anyways.
Yep. No, you're exactly right. There's lots to learn from all this, and if we don't discuss it and unpack it, we're going to miss the lessons learned here, and especially our kids. Our kids won't remember it. Like your kid, Gabriel, was literally born after it. Yep. And so our communication on these types of things are going to be extremely key in raising them and growing them up and getting them into government eventually and learning what's happening.
So we got our story. We got a lot more stories to go that we'll have to unpack further, because there's so many fun ones that just happened in there. Like that one night when I got a phone call, like an anonymous phone call from this group leadership of convoy, and I ran like 18 blocks after eating the biggest meal of my life, and just trying to find this secret location because they had some message, and it just felt so top secret, and it was so goofy. Totally. Anyways, we got a lot more stories we'll unpack about it, but appreciate you guys listening. Would love to hear your comments. Would love to hear your thoughts on Convoy. What do you remember from the COVID area? What's the craziest story that you experienced during COVID? What was your family like? Was there dissension within your family? If you're watching on YouTube, follow us at Real Citizen, RealCTZN, on Instagram, on TikTok, podcast you can find as well, Spotify, we're all there. Hit us up everywhere on X as well.
Send it to a friend that disagrees with you too. That's the whole idea. Say, hey, I'd love to hear your thoughts on this. I know you and I had a very opposing ideas on this, but would like to hear what you think these guys have to say. That's the premise. That's the goal of what we're trying to do, is to start conversations, and hopefully you guys can disagree or agree with someone who had a fully different point of view than you on this. So that's what we're trying to do, is to just stir conversation so that as future issues arise, we can talk about it and we can settle and sit at a table together and discuss ideas.
Right on. Well, until next time, thank you guys. See y'all later.